Welcome back to The Conservative. Hi there, I'm Mike Lannon, your host, and glad to have you come back and sit with me for a half hour. This is good old PEG TV, viewed by many, many people in this area. Got more viewership than they actually realize because there really isn't a whole lot of good viewing on TV. A lot of people, I guess, like some of these shows that are on TV, a lot of these reality shows, Love Island and some of these other things that should drive most people crazy because there's no content, no real meat to them, no real sense of anything. So anyway, that's just one show and just my rant about how poor TV is compared to what it used to be. And somebody somewhere along the line is going to have to get better at what they're doing. Otherwise, television as we know it is going to fail, as well as we see happening in the print press of the world today, and actually happening in the ratings in the normal television news stations of the past. ABC, NBC, and CBS used to be considered great news networks, and if you look at their polls right now, it's very, very bad. As a matter of fact, the media right now has a worse rating than Congress of the United States. So the Congress of the United States has a universal rating in this country of just under 20%, and the news media is less than that. So welcome to continually telling the American public untruths, and untruths don't set well with anybody, and that's a piece of what we're going to talk about today, because we are right now about 35 days away from a very important election, the election of 2020, and there could not be any more difference in two candidates than in President Trump and the Republican Party and what they stand for, and former Vice President Biden and what the Democratic Party stands for. And it's the same issue that I've been talking to you for now, believe it or not, better than 12 years, and that is the left believes that we should have a very big government, that you can't think for yourself, that they know best, and they will regulate your life from a drinking of a Coca-Cola, the large ones, as they did in New York City under Mike Bloomberg, all the way up to the amount of taxes you should pay for unsettled science in the form of climate change and or in the form of one-stop shopping, all-in universal health care, which means an expanded form of Medicare, which also means 185,000 Americans with private health care plans in their workplaces, most of them, would be excluded from having those plans. Well, I've had those plans in my lifetime, and believe you me, to have a private health plan as part of your pay package is a wonderful thing to have, not to have to sit and wait for your doctor, or to even have the doctor that you want, or to be able to go to the hospital that you want, or have the surgical procedures that you want. All those become extremely suspect under a very large government-controlled health care. So most people can sit and realize that most governments, from your local government all the way up to your state government, all the way up to the federal government, is very inept at being able to, under any circumstances, run anything and run it well. It gets too big, it gets too unwieldy, and you have too darn many people deciding for you. And you may sit and think under no circumstances that what this board is thinking is what I believe, and so therefore why do I need to support it? Well, in a large socialistic / communist government, you have no choice. You believe in what they believe, and that's it. Most people in those kinds of countries who voice dissent after it's too late to voice that dissent are finding themselves in a gulag, some form of prison, some form of work camp, or some form of re-education camp, which underneath that umbrella that I just spoke of is everything that's the same. You are going to be enforced slave labor, or you rot in a cell that is smaller than your closet, and you don't, like in the United States, you don't get to go out. They just forget about you. You might get some food, and but you watch those people coming out of those prisons, and you can see that they've been maltreated and some of them for years. And some of these people you never hear from again. If you go to China, you go to the former Soviet Union, even the current Russian state, some of these folks that are dissenters don't ever come back again. If you read the paper very carefully, the one person that is standing in opposition to Putin is fighting, or has been fighting, for his life because he was poisoned, probably by some form of poison in his water bottle that put him into a coma for the month of August, or half of August and half of September, I'm not quite sure. But the point being is that if you're in these countries and you dissent, you'd better watch your backside, your front side, and your both sides, because chances are very good that you're not going to survive that voice. You're going to dissent, and you're going to wind up either dead and or in some form of prison camp. Well, that's what they do. And it's very interesting because if you watch very carefully the socialist nations, those big-wig people right now that are pumping tons of money into the Biden-Harris campaign, Harris is far, far left, further left in her senatorial stances than Bernie Sanders, and that's left. So Harris is further left than him, so she is a socialist. She probably is more than that. Can't call her a communist yet because I've never heard her speak about that, but she's close. But I can tell you this much, that when the socialists take over, slash the walk, as Lenin said, to the communist ideology, those people that are pumped tons of money into the campaign, those people that might be professors who now might realize they've made a mistake and decide that maybe they can voice a new revolution to come back to where we were, they never get the chance. They wind up dead. They wind up losing everything, but they don't live. They wind up dead. Now, why do I know that? Well, go back and look at history. Look at what happened in the fascist state Germany in World War II. Those folks died. Look at the communist state under Stalin in Soviet Union. Those folks that opposed Stalin, millions, died. Those folks that opposed Mao in China, more than millions, closer to hundreds of millions, they died. They did not make it. And Mao's great comment was, well, it doesn't really matter what's a few more million people when we've got more people than anywhere else in the world. And that is their philosophy to this day. As I talk to you this day, the world has now reached over 1 million deaths from the coronavirus, better known in my mind as the Chinese virus, the Wuhan virus, perpetrated on the world by the Chinese for failure to let the world know that they had a problem. And it's very interesting, and the press won't report it, but in China, they refused to let people leave Wuhan and go out into the Chinese communities. They weren't allowed to fly, they weren't allowed to take cars, they weren't allowed to leave their apartments, they weren't allowed to get on trains and go out into China. So those folks in Wuhan, they got COVID, and they had lots of people die in Wuhan from this bat plague. And we don't know for sure. It looks like it did not come out of the bat wet market, meaning live animals like the bats that they would put into bat soup and eat. It does not look like it came from there. It really appears as if Wuhan virus came right out of a Chinese lab. And whether we like it or not, in the year the year 2015, I don't know why I said 19, the year 2015, we spent a considerable number of millions of dollars, closer to 17 million, to help the Chinese in a laboratory in Wuhan study COVID and the virus COVID that is associated with Chinese bats. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I can certainly see that where someone who is experimenting with these kinds of things and is careless in the lab, which I suspect might happen, that could be carried out of the lab accidentally and or on purpose. And there we have the million people dead and the millions of people that have been very, very sick. Nothing is going to happen because of this. We're just not going to do a thing, and that's such a shame. There's never, ever, it seems, to be any kind of a consequence for the folks who absolutely do bad things on the left. Now, if that had come out of, for instance, the Trump administration by accident, he'd be out of office already. They'd have impeached him 50 times over. They already, I love saying this, the pun, the trumped-up Trump charges of being involved with the conspiracy in the 2016 election with the Russians. Well, again, the press won't tell you. The 2016 election Russian hoax was bought and paid for by the Clinton Foundation, Hillary. They worked hard at putting together a conspiracy, better known as the Steele dossier. They have done all kinds of conspiratory kinds of things, including up on July 5th, after they knew on July 4th that, which I think is July 4th, 2015, they absolutely knew that Michael Flynn, for instance, General Flynn, had absolutely nothing to do with the Russians. It's all coming out now. They ruined this man's life. They bankrupted him, okay? Now, he was scared out of his mind, I'm sure. And so the charge that the judge, Sullivan, is now demanding that the trial continue on when the Department of Justice has said there's absolutely no way that we're going to pursue this case any further. They lost in court. There's no sense in coming back around because they've seen enough evidence to know that in another court case it's going to be thrown out because the FBI and the intelligence community cheated. They lied. They changed information. They did everything they could because on July 5th, Mr. Joe Biden and Mr. Barack Obama, president and vice president of this country, decided that they knowingly, that the Flynn case was all a hoax, knowingly said to go ahead and continue that case and to fraudulently play with the game. Well, those two are never going to pay a price for this. Now, maybe Biden will not be elected, but it's allegedly a very close election right now. I'm telling you, as I sit here, if Mr. Joe Biden, who there's something wrong here with this guy, when you finally see this show, the first debate will be over. I have no idea what it's going to look like. But as I sit here today, Mr. Biden is not going to pay for his 47 years of doing absolutely nothing and his July 5th statement of trying to do a coup and bring down the new president, Donald J. Trump. But in today's debate, which will be happening right after this show, because this is being taped on a Tuesday afternoon, and we'll see the first debate, and already the Democrats have said they are not going to allow any candidate, namely Biden, because Trump has already said you can check me anytime you want, for an earpiece. Hillary got an earpiece so that they could pump her with the answers. It was obvious, and we've seen enough. We've seen at least one good video where Biden flicked a fly off his ear and his earpiece came out. So people can sit in a back room and feed him the information. That's a puppet for you. But worse than that, this guy isn't campaigning. He's staying in his basement. Most Americans know that there's something wrong there. And who knows what's wrong, but the speculation is out there that he's being Botoxed in the face to make him look younger. He's being given hair enhancements to make the hair look fuller. This is a 77-year-old guy. You're not going to make him look any younger, and most people know he's 77, so why try to make him younger? It's not going to change most people. You're talking about a debate tonight, and when you come back to this show, it'll be over, and we'll be able to talk about it if I so choose, or if you see me on the street and say you'd like me to do it. We're talking about a debate tonight that most people don't give a darn about, okay? I'm sure it's going to be heavily watched, but most people have already made up their mind. They have to just wait 30 days to go and vote. Voting's already begun in the country. I thought it very interesting that in Ilhan Omar's Minnesota district, they've caught one guy with 300 ballots in the back of his car, and he's harvesting them, and he says for every one he fills out or destroys, he gets paid for it. Well, that's a criminal offense. It's a federal offense to have, I think it's a federal offense to have more than 3 ballots. I know that in my own situation in my lifetime, I've had more than 2 ballots in my hand. The city clerk made a mistake. I had already voted for absentee ballot and had walked into the poll behind my wife. She got her ballot because she had not voted absentee, and I was just behind her, and they handed me a ballot. My name hadn't been checked off the roster. I'd already voted. So I walked by, had it in my hand. I turned and I said, "You can't do this. I've already voted." Well, the city clerk of Rutland was so angry with me for his mistake. I'm sorry. You guys are the ones that should have had it all crossed off, because I had voted absentee at least 3 weeks before the election where you go to the voting place. So the same thing occurred when in this city, Doug Gage ran his very first election over in the, I think it was Ward 3, and a very close election against Mrs. Corsell, first time Doug had run, and he lost by 1 vote. Well, when they did the recount, they found the 1 vote, and that meant that he did lose by 1 vote, and then in a bag from a different ward, they found another vote for Corsell. Absolutely impossible. The ballot should never have come into another ward's bag. They were supposed to be locked and sealed and unpenetrable. So that was a very interesting situation. But those are 2 very small instances of 1, potential fraud, and 2, fraud. If it can happen in a little community like Rutland, Vermont, just think what can happen out there in a organized manner in big cities. And I'm sure, because I can remember in Massachusetts when the Dems would be running in the city that I lived in at that time, there were captains' meetings. Why do I know that? Because I was there, where they were talking about how you harvest votes. So this is not new. It's been around. I'm 76. It's been around, as far as I can tell, for at least 50 years, because I started getting involved in politics probably around 25 years of age. So started getting really interested in the conservative view, because I just don't believe we should have very big government. Just don't believe that we should have that. So I wanted to talk also today about the fact that we're in a moral dilemma in this country. You've heard me talk about the equilateral triangle before, the importance of having a solid base that's spiritual in nature, the knowing of the right from wrong, good from evil, the yin and the yang, whatever you want to put there that keeps you grounded and focused on good things versus evil things. And then the other leg, which is equal to the spiritual side, is the intellectual side. What are you reading? What are you learning? What are you knowing, understanding, and becoming wise about? That's a very important leg. And then the last leg of this equilateral triangle is the physical side. Okay, the importance of keeping the body strong, to keeping the body in good health, to not overeat, not to overdrink, not to smoke, not to do all kinds of things, so you can keep this strong, healthy body for a good quality of life for the 120 years that you are expected by the ancient texts to live. So prior to Noah, if you read the Bible, you can see that people were living quite long, anywhere from 365 years all the way up to, I think, 570, 580. They were very long lives prior to the Great Flood. After the Great Flood, biblically it stated that the life expectancy will be 120 years, and currently, that's exactly what we know scientifically, is that the body, taken well care of, will last about 120 years with a quality of life. But you don't have a quality of life physically if you don't keep a spiritual side and you don't keep an intellectual side. Thomas Edison once said, very importantly, I think, is the only reason that we have a body is to move the brain. And I've always said, when the zygote is formed at conception, within moments of the sperm hitting the egg and the cellular division begins, the brain begins to be developed. And within moments of that, you can see the small little pea-shaped brain with a little cord coming out of it. It looks like a little S. It's like a bean. That's the brain and the spinal column. Already formed, already functioning. The only reason that that thing needs a body is to move itself around, to see the world, to invent, to become knowledgeable, to be able to understand, to be able to be innovative, inventive, to be able to be wise. So there's an ancient text out there, 10 volumes long, that talks even in greater detail than the Bible about these things. It comes from India. Most people have never read it. Most people have never even heard about it. But it's called the Mahabharata. Okay? So it's the Mahabharata. Okay? Little slow pronunciation so you can get that. And you can go find that at Amazon. I think it's about $80 to buy the 10 volumes. But that's a very ancient text that talks about the three-sided triangle. And it also talks about the great nuclear war that occurred 50 to 60,000 years ago. So it's considered a myth, it's considered a legend, but you go back and read it and you say, holy smokes, this is unbelievable. So there's all kinds of ancient texts that we can't read. The Etruscan Golden Book is one, probably one of the oldest books ever. Love to be able to read that, but we don't know how to read Etruscan. We don't know how to read that. So we have to think about that and be able to work through it, and maybe someday somebody will be able to translate it. So those of you that are parents of young kids, I tell kids all the time, be thinking of things like that. Use your brain. You know, if you've got a propensity, for instance, to learn languages, you like the written word, you like the way the letters form, the 26 letters of the American alphabet, or you like the way the Russian alphabet looks, or you like the way they sound, you like to study caves or archaeology, there's a place in life for you being a linguist to find out how they translate old texts, and that would be wonderful for people to be able to do that. We're going to get paid some significant money to get down and do that. It's certainly better than going to learn how to be a basket weaver. So that's very, very important. So when I come back around to the Bible in the few minutes that I have left here, you got to remember that the moral compass was at one time the church. And you had wonderful preachers or you had wonderful priests that stood in the pulpit and would tell you the truth, T-R-U-T-H. They would tell you the spiritual truth that connected to the intellectual truth, that connected to the physical truth. Aristotle called it the spiritual side, the intellectual side, and the body side. And Jesus said, you love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart, mind, body, and soul. Notice, spiritual side, soul. Okay? Intellectual side, mind. Physical side, body. Jesus was talking the same as Aristotle, but he also put into that the heart being the piece that pumps all of that process. So love the Lord thy God with thy whole heart, mind, body, and soul has gone out the window because people don't believe anymore that there's eternal salvation. They just think, okay, I'm a good person, I'm going. That's not what Jesus taught. And so if you don't know that, then you need to get back into the scripture or get back into church where there's someone in the pulpit talking about the fact that if you're a Christian, not just a Catholic, but if you're a Christian, there's 4 tenets that Jesus talked about that he consistently said in the Gospels about how you get to eternal life. First thing that he said is that the road is wide to destruction. So most people are on that wide road because he said to eternal life was a narrow gate. You had to do 4 things, and here they are. First off, if you're a Christian, you have to be baptized, flat out. That's biblical. And then the second piece that you have to absolutely believe in is you have to believe in the Eucharist, or you have to believe in the spiritual well-being of the Lord, that he did indeed come on this earth, that he was indeed the Son of God, that he was indeed transported his body and soul into what most Christians call Holy Communion. And if you're a Catholic, you have to believe and do believe that that body and soul is presented every time you go to Mass. Well, there's the first 2 tenets. If you're not practicing those 2, you're on that wide road. And then the next 2 aren't too difficult to do. they're all difficult to do, but you have to have the faith. You have to literally have faith that all of this is true, because Jesus talked about the fact that even if he were able to perform all kinds of miracles, which he did, you still wouldn't believe that he had come from heaven. And people to this day don't believe that. So you have to have great faith. You have to hold on to that faith and maintain it, and not allow you yourself to lose all that you've worked hard for, because you must also receive the reward in full. You don't get half a reward here, okay? And then finally, the tenets that were given to Moses, the 10 Commandments, they're all sitting there to be obeyed as the final piece here, doing the will of God. Now, those are the 4 things, and I'm not here as a conservative to tell you that this is a religious show, because it's not. It's a conservative view. And I always talk about the spiritual side of that equilateral triangle, and you should too. If you're not doing that side, you're going to collapse. On any one of these legs not worked on, if you're not doing anything physical, in other words, you're sitting on the couch and you're allowing your children, for instance, to spend 6 hours a day watching video games rather than go out and have fresh air, rather than go out and play, rather than go out and go for a run or go for a walk or play a sport or do something physical, you're asking for them to have a short life. As a matter of fact, scientists, follow the science according to Biden, scientists are now saying that this is the first time we've got a generation coming on that are not going to live as long as their parents, okay? So this is really unfortunate, but it's the physical side of things. And then the intellectual side, we can see right now, if you go and you study very carefully what's happening in education in America, or in that matter around the world, folks that lived in my generation had a much better education than the children are getting today. There's just too much being asked of teachers to do other than reading, writing, and arithmetic. And the foundational elements of good brain functioning, the mind, the brain, is associated with education, and it hasn't changed much since Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato. It hasn't changed much since Pythagoras. It hasn't changed much since Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Newton, and Einstein. Those guys all got phenomenal educations because they were deeply embracing reading, writing, and arithmetic, okay? They didn't have all this other stuff that's being thrown at the schools to teach. Okay, now one of the tenets of the new government is to destroy the nuclear family. It's a socialistic tenet. If I can make sure there's no mom, functioning mom, or I can make sure there's no functioning dad, if I can make sure there's no mom and dad in the household, and I can split these families up to the degree that they have to depend upon the government, then I can destroy the most important unit that allows a constitutional republic like America to stand. The second thing that Lannon said, that was the first thing, destroy that family. The second thing he said is that we have to destroy what's going on in the pulpit. We've got to make sure that we don't allow men or women in certain religions, but men, to stand in that pulpit and tell the truth. We've got to make sure that those people are taken down and thrown out, and we put in their place weak men who will preach a social justice conscience so that anything goes. It's okay to do this and it's okay to do that. And so therefore we get that culture of pro-death. We have people that come out of Christian communities on a Sunday and claim that they're Christians. And they can't be. There's no way, because the 5th commandment is thou shalt not kill. And killing is either euthanasia, which they're at right now, deciding which way you should die. Interesting, in this COVID time, this Wuhan virus, the number of people that the Democrat in New York, Governor Cuomo, sent back into nursing homes, the vulnerable population, knowing that they had COVID, and now the greatest number of deaths in America are in New York State, most of them all in, more than 75% of them, all in the old age population, 75 and older, out of nursing homes. Wow, isn't that just a nice way to reduce the cost of end-of-life care? Now, that is a conspiracy theory, but think about it. What's the possibility, okay? That's very costly, end-of-life care, very costly. Well, I didn't get to cover everything I wanted to cover in this half hour, never do. Hopefully you're going to do some thinking, and whatever you do, make sure you vote. Be thinking about it. Make sure your vote counts. See you next time. Bye now.